Hello there. Have you heard what's happening in Sudan? Do you even know? I know, it's complicated. It's messy. But let me try to break it down. Right now, one of the worst humanitarian crises on Earth is unfolding in Sudan, and the world is watching in silence. Thousands are being killed, villages burned to the ground. And yes, many black Sudanese people are being massacred like livestock, unarmed civilians caught between two forces that claim to represent them. So what exactly is going on? The Sudanese government has accused the United Arab Emirates of secretly sponsoring genocide inside Sudan, supplying drones, weapons, and mercenaries to the militia carrying out these attacks. And when Sudan took the case to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ refused to act. Why? Because the UAE never signed the 1948 Convention on Genocide, the very treaty designed to stop crimes like this from happening again. Think about that. The world built a system to prevent genocide, but it doesn't apply if your country didn't sign the form. Before we dive deeper, do me a favor, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it helps the algorithm push stories like this, stories most people never get to hear. Now let's talk about Sudan. Once upon a time, Sudan was the largest country in Africa, stretching from the Red Sea all the way down into the heart of the continent. But that changed after decades of war and division. Today, the land is split in two, Sudan in the north and South Sudan in the south. The north is dominated by Arab-identifying elites, mostly Muslim, the south by black African communities, Christian, animist, and deeply tied to their indigenous faiths. Sudan gained independence in 1956 from Britain and Egypt, but freedom didn't bring equality. From the start, the government was dominated by the Arab minority, who took over the cities, the universities, the hospitals, every lever of power. Meanwhile, millions of black Sudanese in the south and west were left behind. They demanded fair treatment, basic services, representation. They wanted to be part of the country they fought for, but instead, they were met with bullets. And so, the cycle began. Rebellion after rebellion, decade after decade. Every uprising crushed, every protest silenced, and every generation told the same lie, that unity must come before justice. Then came the Janjaweed, a name that would become synonymous with horror. An Arab militia, armed by the government, unleashed on black villages in western Sudan. They didn't fight soldiers, they slaughtered civilians. Entire villages wiped out. Children burned alive, families erased. Between 2003 and 2010, the world watched what became known as the Darfur Genocide, a massacre so brutal that even the United Nations called it one of the darkest chapters of the century. Officially, around 400,000 people were killed, but eyewitnesses and survivors insist the true number is far higher, maybe over 1 million. By then, black Sudanese had had enough. They were tired of living like second-class citizens in their own country, and after decades of fighting, the world finally agreed to let them go. In 2011, the South broke away, forming a new nation called South Sudan. The separation didn't fix the disease that caused the division, because what's happening now in Sudan is not new. It's the same system of power and prejudice reborn under different names, from Janjaweed to a parallel army. Remember the militia I told you about? The Janjaweed? They didn't disappear. They changed names, they got uniforms, and they were given a license to act like a state within a state. Under Omar al-Bashir, who ruled Sudan from the late 1980s, the Janjaweed were the brutal arm of counterinsurgency in Darfur, terrorizing villages, killing civilians, burning homes. But by the early 2010s, the militia was no longer just a ragged force of horseback killers. The regime decided to formalize them. The Janjaweed were reorganized into the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, a paramilitary force that could be deniable when needed and essential when desired. That move seemed clever at first. Make the killers look like soldiers, give them pay, trucks, and a badge, make atrocities someone else's problem. But there was a cost the government didn't calculate. Power begets appetite. The RSF, led by Mohammed Hamdan Hemedi Dagalo, began to grow richer and stronger than anyone expected. They didn't just carry guns, they grabbed land, they took control of gold-producing areas, and they built their own economic network. Sudan is a major gold producer in Africa, and the RSF moved quickly to secure mines and trade routes. Money followed, power deepened. On the other side stood the regular army, the Sudanese armed forces, led by generals like Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Two forces, two loyalties, one country. The RSF had presidential patronage plus business ties. The army had the official command structure and international legitimacy. The result was a dangerous duopoly, a state split between uniformed institutions and a private war machine. Fast forward to 2019. After months of mass protests over economy and corruption, the people rose up and removed Bashir from power. Two men from the military class stepped in to steer the transition, Burhan and Hemedti. For a moment, it looked like a reset, but it was only a new arrangement of the same old players. The transitional plan required the RSF to integrate into the national army, to become part of the state, not a state within the state. But the RSF refused. Why would they? They had weapons, they had mines, they had money and autonomy. Subordinating themselves to the army would have meant giving all that up. In short, the RSF had more to lose than the state had to gain. A country split between two armed centers of power, each with its own economy, each answering to different masters, and millions of civilians trapped in the middle. The rivalry didn't end with Bashir's fall, it just changed form. When both generals realized they couldn't share power, they did what soldiers always do when peace becomes inconvenient. They reached for their guns. That's what's happening in Sudan today, a war for control between two men and two armies. So, a parallel army stayed parallel. A militia with business interests kept fighting like a private enterprise. So how did the RSF become this powerful? How does a militia outgun a national army? That's where the United Arab Emirates comes in. Sudan is one of Africa's biggest gold producers, and much of that gold now flows through the RSF's networks into Dubai, where it's refined and traded. According to Global Witness and Reuters, gold smuggled out of Sudan supplies a huge portion of the UAE's private refineries. It's cheaper to deal with a militia than with a government. Militias don't ask for contracts. They don't audit payments. They don't care about laws. A few $1 million in cash, or a plane load of weapons, that's all it takes to keep the gold flowing. So yes, Sudan bleeds, but somebody profits. Sudan isn't just another battlefield, it's a gold mine, literally. The country is one of Africa's largest producers of gold. Some reports rank it among the top 5 in the world. And guess who buys most of it? The United Arab Emirates. For years, planes loaded with Sudanese gold have flown quietly to Dubai, where it's refined and traded through private channels. But here's where the story gets darker. Most of those gold mines are now controlled not by the state, but by the Rapid Support Forces, the same militia waging war against Sudan's army. Which means every bar of gold leaving those mines helps finance the very people burning villages on the ground. It's easy to see why the UAE prefers doing business with the RSF. When you deal with a government, there are laws, contracts, taxes, paperwork. When you deal with a militia, all you need is cash, no questions asked, a few $1 million for drones, fuel, or weapons, and you get access to unlimited resources. It's cleaner on the balance sheet, dirtier on the conscience. But gold isn't the only thing connecting them. The UAE is desert land, dependent on imports for over 90% of its food. Sudan, by contrast, has vast, fertile soil, one of the few remaining green belts of the Arab world. That's why Emirati firms have bought up huge tracts of farmland in Sudan, to feed their people, not Sudan's. And now, as the RSF tightens its grip on territory, seizing cities like Al Fasher in Darfur, they're not just winning battles, they're winning control of the country's lifeblood. If the army falls, so does every community that sided with it. And remember, many of those communities are black Sudanese, the same groups who've been hunted for decades. The RSF was born from the Janjaweed, and their methods haven't changed. When they say total victory, it means total destruction. Yet somehow, this isn't front page news. We scroll past Sudan to read about Gaza, Ukraine, and yes, those stories matter, but here, entire black communities are being erased, and the world barely whispers. You're watching Grey BTC. If this opened your eyes, hit like and subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it helps bring these stories to light. Until next time, stay aware, stay human.